People, let's make a start. Okay. This was something that occurred to me. I was listening to the Productivity Commission talk on Channel 2, and it came to me that we don't talk enough about waste. And you'll see that I've taken a specific turn on it, and I'll get to that in a minute. But it's one of those things that in real terms, we are a very wasteful world. And you'll see a number of areas where I'll talk about waste, and hopefully I'll give you at least some hints of solutions. Okay. And the problem is with a lot of this stuff, and I've been working on waste in my consulting work for years, so many people are disinterested. They just don't care.
You mean uninterested, Peter? Yes.
They'd rather do something else, whatever that is. I absolutely have no idea. But in discussions with people, every now and then you may get a small win, but to actually get people to consider this as an important thing, and I'll show you why it's important, they tend to think, well, no, we're more interested in doing something else. So,
hey, Peter, before you move on,
I
find it ironic that slide panel you've got to clearly a BHP one, right?
It is.
And I'm going to talk the BHP logo on the train at the bottom. But just as an observation about productivity, I think BHP Steel and BHP Petroleum were well on the way of achieving high productivity, but the minerals part of BHP, which is all that remains now, was and still is the least productive part of the business.
Well, no, they actually, I mean, their business model, when I've discussed it with them, sort of leaves them out on a limb. The only time they want to spend money on mines is when they're developing them. And then they just want to milk the cow till it dies. That's right. And they don't want to make any changes. They're just not interested in wholesale changes in the way that they do things, except at that one point in time when they're creating a new mine. And it's a peculiarism of the minerals industry. But it is how it goes.
Peter.
What? Thanks, whoever said that. That's all right. You want to do the talk, Michael?
No, it's Ian.
It's not me, you idiot.
It's Ian.
Okay.
He's just having a good night.
Okay. My company, Productivity One, was set up to investigate and address organisational productivity issues. In fact, we've developed tools to be able to do this. And one of the things that the tool I developed clearly does is indicate areas where there is waste. But it's not only material waste. There's wasteful practices in terms of time, in terms of material, in terms of overhead, in terms of a whole lot of business practice that really should be considered. Okay.
Here's a really good example. Big concert at the MCG. 70,000 people get there to enjoy whatever show is on. And then guess what happens as soon as the show finishes? And it's the same with the footy game as well. There's 70,000 people all trying to get home at the same time. They're waiting for taxis, waiting for, it's ridiculous.
It's terrible. And not enough space on the platforms.
No. People, again, if you actually built a platform or platforms to handle that level, how often would that level be required?
Every day.
Every week? Isn't there a footy game every week?
Right, but still not always at the MCG. Still, the answer to it is you need to think about it as, is it a sensible outlay, or can you get a bigger bang for your buck somewhere else? But leave that and we'll come back to it.
Okay.
Okay.
So Mike,
Now,
do we want to have people leaving in lots of 10,000 people every 10 minutes during the last quarter of Collingwood-Carlton matches? So only the last 10,000.
Yeah, the losing team
the
can
final
leave.
score.
Can leave
when
first.
it changes matches. Eh?
No, last.
all right. Okay. I ask you these questions, people. Do you mind people wasting your time?
Yes.
Do you like wasting other people's time?
Oh, yes, it's good.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, good. Are you happy when your project team does tasks not on the project plan and charges it to your project?
Yeah, I like talking too much, Peter. Therefore,
yeah,
I like
absolutely.
wasting time there.
So, yeah. So Peter, move on to the next slide, will you?
Okay.
Just using an example.
Yeah. Okay.
Just joking.
Okay.
Just joking.
It's all right. Productivity isn't everything, but in the long run, it's almost everything. A country's ability to improve its standard of living over time depends almost entirely, people, almost entirely on its ability to raise its output per worker. Now, this is when you look at how this is what the Productivity Commission was saying on Channel 2. The issue comes down to, if you've got a limited amount of resource, then what all you're left with is getting more out of that resource.
Yeah.
And there's nothing, yes, you can obviously get more resources, you can bring more people into the country and do things there, but in essence, if they're no less productive, then you have not achieved a lot. So productivity, a very important issue. Okay. And people have so many definitions of waste. This is what some people consider waste. Some people see as an opportunity to recycle. Some people think of it only as what you take to the tip. Some people think it's actually just wasting money. And there's so many definitions of what it is. And I'm only really going to concentrate tonight on basically the time aspect in particular anyway. I will talk a little bit about ordinary waste, but mostly it'll be about time. Okay. And here's the one slide that is about real waste. And this was an example that somebody gave of recycle, reduce, reuse, and it was ditching disposable items. And I thought, gee, that'd be great if we could get rid of the politicians like that.
That sounds good to me.
That's a reasonable request.
You get rid of the gases, you know, the CO2 gases.
Well, no. Again, CO2 gas, if you could find a decent use for it, then maybe it's not such a bad thing. But if you're going to talk about, and I was thinking tonight about cows in the paddock and how much hydrogen they produce, and whether in fact you could actually plug the cow into a network on the farm and collect all the hydrogen.
It's actually methane, isn't it?
Yeah, Peter, you got your wrong element.
Well, it doesn't matter. You can still burn it. So it doesn't matter what gas it is. It's irrelevant. But the point is, is it something you're wasting, or is it something that you can actually think about in terms of what you might reuse? Therefore, is it actually waste? Whereas time The one thing I don't think you can get back is time.
Yeah.
I'm not sure you can reuse it, but you can reduce it. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay, so wasteful practices, and I found this definition: systemic and avoidable practices in the consumer economy that diminish our ability to make people better off. And as I said, wasteful practices will be the major focus of this presentation. So are these systemic practices, are they really avoidable? And I reckon they are in a large part, and we'll look at that as we go on. Okay, and I looked at several definitions, and this fellow Dennis Donovan came up with is wasteful practices means therefore to habitually squander or neglect. So we're going to look at how people squander time or neglect the fact that they're not managing it. And anything, and you'll see this in business after business, there are so many practices that are actually cemented on that they will never change. And I'll talk about some examples when I get up to it. But in essence, the whole thing is that was fine. Let's just keep doing that. But you must continually think about how could I do it better? Yeah. And I'll do some of that as we get on. Okay, going to talk a little bit about the government first, and then a little bit about industry, and then some examples of how you may be able to improve your personal productivity. But in real terms, unless you had one of these things as a goal, and here's some goals for you, and I'll talk about that: reducing costs, increasing productivity, improving customer service, creating operational transparency, driving continuous business improvement. Now, once upon a time, I did some work for the Department of Aviation, who are going to put in a paperless supply system.
Wow.
And no, it was a laudable thing.
Oh, yes.
And as part of this, the government had a methodology, and it was a wonderful methodology. I don't know where they bought it, but somehow or other I got a gig on it. And I was supposed to do steps 4 and 5 with my colleague. But in order to do steps 4 and 5, you actually had to do step 1, which was put down what your objectives are.
Oh, dear.
And I said to the department people, I said, oh, could you give me the objectives, please? You should have done those already. That was step 1. Oh, no, they said, oh, we didn't know what to do, so we decided we wouldn't do that. They said, Peter, could you provide some objectives for us? And I thought about that for a moment. And I said, okay, I'll give it a go. Anyway, I came up with some laudable tasks: reduce inventory by 30%, reduce the number of warehouses by 3, and this, that, the other, all good cost-cutting measures, all measurable. And they took that to the Deputy Secretary of the department, and she said, oh, no, they're not our objectives. And it finally came back to me after I'd sent out this incredible thing that actually was measurable. It said, we will save some inventory somewhere, sometime, somehow.
Yeah. Typical.
And I said to myself, well, if you're going to water it down to nothing, you might as well do nothing. And in the end, they didn't achieve a paperless supply system, but they did reduce the amount of paper, which I thought was at least reasonable. So in essence, unless you are committed to an objective, then maybe you're not going to make it.
Yeah.
And a
Okay.
realistic objective as well. There's no point, aiming
Yep.
for something that's just not feasible today.
Indeed.
Do you
Indeed.
remember the email system for the Department of Education, Peter?
I do remember it, I think.
Yeah, they wanted to give every student an email address,
Oh, good.
which is terrific, seeing that there weren't that many computers around at the time.
Yes.
And you suggested doing a business case, which they reluctantly agreed to. And in the end, they worked out that the most productive thing was to reduce the amount of faxing that went on between the regions and the schools.
Yeah.
And it
I also remember that one. I wrote I actually took that project over from Eugene. What was his name?
Yeah, I didn't actually meet him. I only got
Anyway,
involved.
he kind of left halfway through the project and left me in a lurch.
Yeah.
So I had to take it over. Anyway, I did a proper cost benefit analysis.
Yeah.
And I put in all the financial stuff and everything else, and they said, "Oh no, that's useless." And I said, "Oh, sorry about that," figuring they'd like what I did. Anyway, it was 3 weeks later, absolutely 3 weeks later. Peter, could you come in and have a talk to us? Can you tell us about your cost benefit analysis? Because they couldn't come up with anything themselves, and they finally realized what I was telling them was right.
Absolutely. That I know from other sources that objective that they had made an absolutely huge difference to the way the schools operated.
There you go.
It was amazing. Yeah.
We're going to talk a bit about government departments because they spend your money. Did you know?
Yes.
And there's a heap of them. And I sent you an email tonight. I don't want you to read it now, but read it after the meeting. And it talks about, I'm not sure, I think it was the last Liberal budget, and it just comes up with what waste was in that Liberal budget. And you will be amazed at the crap they were going to waste money on, mostly on ants, which seemed very nice if you wanted ants. They seem to want to spend a lot of money on them. But it's an important thing, and we'll talk about this, is that what we really want is value for the money that we spend. And I'll talk about a few
unless
examples
you're a politician.
And unless you're a politician, well, yes, you're only interested in what they put in the trough in front of you, aren't you? Yes.
Well, yes, basically, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So which one of these do you think is the most wasteful?
Defence.
It's up there.
Medicine.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's medicine. NDIS gets a good Guernsey, and Centrelink has got to be on the list too.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And if you look at the military waste there, the funny thing about defence that I've known for years since I was in the army is that if somebody attacks Australia and you have to order 1,000 trucks, 55 tanks, and 3 aeroplanes, the problem is they actually take time to get there.
Yeah.
So you actually have to have them sitting on the ground in mothballs, ready and waiting for our next war.
Yes. I discovered something about the Air Force. That to in order to defeat the Air Force, all you need to do is stage a accident on the road to Williamtown Air Base.
Excellent.
You can't get in and out of the place.
To the Chinese.
Yep. That's I'm going to make a lot of money telling the Chinese that.
Well, yeah. And I mean, that was really funny. As part of my job as a technical storeman in the army, they gave me top secret clearance because I had to read complete equipment specifications for all kinds of equipment, and apparently that was top secret. Basically, I couldn't understand why anyone would be interested in all that crap. We had books and books and books of it all locked up. And I thought to myself, I'm not interested in reading it, and nor is anyone else.
You'd be surprised, Peter.
Well, maybe it is. So, well, I was never going to be a great spy. I didn't see the value.
That's right.
Okay.
But I could have told you that anyway, Peter.
Thank you. And before people get too excited about government departments and how great they run, I was part of it at both federal and state levels. For those of you who don't know, I was an accounting officer at Victorian Railways, and I was also a paymaster. The worst job on the world. I absolutely hated that. Other people's money I've hated ever since. And the problem is with jobs like this, I also had a job that was partially procurement. It was paying people's bills. And I was given an edict. Peter, when you receive the invoice, sit on it for 30 days.
Yeah.
And then when you think that you should look at it, sit on it for another 30. And then when people ring up, you say, oh, no, we've lost that. Could you please send us another copy? And I sit there going, why would you do that? I mean, businesses need money to survive.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this giving credit, unlimited credit, just because you didn't want to spend the money, seemed a bloody pointless sort of exercise.
It's immoral.
Yeah.
And Peter, you'll find that larger organizations deliberately do that, especially as they get closer to reporting season.
You bet.
From the point of view to make the balance sheet look a lot better. It doesn't impact the P&L because the expense is there. It's already been accounted for. It's in the revenue and margin numbers, but the balance sheet looks a lot better because you've got a lot more cash. Even though you've got a lot more liabilities, it just makes the company look artificially larger than what it actually is.
Yes. Yeah, well, this was after a little while. I was using this form, I don't know, designed by Adam, I think. It must go back that far. And it had no value. And they said, oh, no, you've got to fill it out. And I go, but nobody looks at it. Nobody uses it. And then I sat down and I redesigned the form. I printed it myself. I put it into operation and they go, why are you doing that? We always did it this way. Yeah. And I'm going, no, what you're doing's wrong. And they go, no, we need to do it this way. And after a while, they crushed me. They really did.
Peter, I'll give you my spin on accounts payable. It was one of my first jobs. And it was similar to what you were describing, all these accounts that you had to hold. And one day I thought, this is crazy. So I paid everything so I could clear my desk. Well, management, everything. There was not one outstanding invoice. Doesn't matter how overdue it was or how long I was supposed to hold it. Management came to me about, 3-4 days later when all their cash was drained from the bank.
Yep.
Yes, but your KPIs were looking really good, were they, Vita? You were the most productive employee.
No, the problem was the bank overdraft wasn't available, or it had gone over.
Hey, Peter, one of the things, the ironies in reflecting on that, the biggest job we did as Indigo Partners was, or have done for Big Indigo's Partners, is a consulting job that Dennis led for Anglo Gold Ashanti. And they actually paid us twice on our invoice.
Excellent.
We had a single invoice, So it was the biggest invoice we ever gave because it was all done in one job lot, and they paid it twice. And it took ages. I mean, we fessed up to it, and then it took ages for them to get around to, okay, here's how you can pay it back to us. And we paid it back to us less about 10 grand for bookkeeping costs involved in the hassle. And,
how nice.
And they were quite happy with that because they were happy that we fessed up and we gave them their money back. But the other one, on the other extreme, one of the smallest jobs we did is I reviewed the mining strategy for Telstra when they got a new vertical lead, I don't know, about 10 years ago, and so it was only a few days' work to review their strategy, and it took me about a year to get, you know, on the you know, the creditors list or whatever. Is it debtors or creditors list?
Creditors.
Telstra, you know, go through all the palaver of doing that, and his PA was apologising how long this is taking. I reckon it took about a year to get our smallest invoice paid by Telstra.
Well, you'll be pleased to know that one of my early jobs for Price Waterhouse was building an account payable system for telecom. And this is something that you guys have never seen before in your life. The system,
but it's something we've probably all suffered from ever since as Telstra customers.
No. I'll tell you the corollary there. Talk about the waste in it. The issue came down to we had this package that we modified, but it had limitations in the value. So they had one, and I've forgotten how much. It might have been that they had to pay 5 million. Let's say that. I can't remember the exact number, but it was in the millions. And the only way we could do it was actually raise 5 checks. So we had to do it for 999,999.99. And we had to do this multiple times to pay them because the system wasn't capable of handling numbers like that. Now, this was actually, it had a general ledger in it as well, and we got it to actually work very well for them, and they were very pleased. It had a terrific reporting thing in it that we developed its own report generator in the package, and we redeveloped that to meet their needs, and it actually started really delivering for them. And we actually maintained that system for them for, I think it was about 2 or 3 years. And then I said to them, oh, do you want to renew the maintenance contract? And they said, oh, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to SAP. And I said, but you've only had it in 2 years. And they said, oh, no, we don't care. We're going to SAP. So there you go.
And how long did it take them to implement SAP?
Well, one wonders, Ian. I think quite a long time.
Yes. And meanwhile, it wasn't maintained. Yes, that's great.
Yeah. And honestly, if you needed a bigger one or a better one, and I'm not sure it was better, I actually don't
SAP
think it
is
was.
definitely not matter. No matter what it is, SAP is not better.
Actually, I was going to say, Peter, that your maximum invoice point reminded me that someone who was pretty high up at BHP told me, oh, it was a while ago now, but that Accenture broke their system when they got a monthly bill during the OneSAP program for 100 million.
Yep.
Right.
and Accenture managed to milk BHP for something like $1 billion over the lifetime of OneSAP. It's the biggest project in their history. And
yep, I'm going to actually talk about
and
that.
And they milked it for what it's worth.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on. Now, the problems with government departments, people will tell you it's all about bureaucracy and red tape. Now, red tape is an idiom to regulation or conformity to formal rules or standards which are claimed to be excessive, rigid, or redundant.
Yeah.
Now, this is not a science, it's an art form. And government departments have this down absolutely pat. So in real terms, red tape is something that they put in to actually delay action being taken. And my friends at Centrelink are probably the worst people I have ever met in my life. I mean, the issue comes down to when you go in there, what they're told to tell you is no. You can't have whatever you want. That's their premise in life. That's their objective. Because every time you go in there, they go, fill in this 15-page form. And you fill it in and they go, no, it's wrong. And you go, okay, what do I fix? And they go, do this. And you give it back to them. No, it's wrong. And after you've done it 5 times, most people give up. And the time
it's even worse than that now. They don't even talk to you unless you made an appointment before you go in.
Yes, no, well, we
have to make that by phone, and they never answer the phone.
Oh, no.
And we, this was to get Hilda a pharmaceutical benefits card. And I had one, and I could not see why Hilda shouldn't have one too. I mean, our income was the same. Everything was the same, except they found reasons why Hilda couldn't have it, because she couldn't fill the form in. She didn't have photo ID. She didn't have this. She didn't have that. But I wasn't going to let them win. And I just kept at it. And eventually, sorry, mate.
That's what you need to do. You need to keep at it.
Yeah, and I did. And finally, we got the card. And I think to myself, why didn't we just sit down together and we work through it and fix it? No, we got to go through all this waste. We wasted our time. I mean, this was Hilda and me going from Hampton to Cheltenham on God knows how many trips, and sitting down with them to tell us it was wrong. If it was wrong, why didn't you tell us all that was wrong with it? I did not understand any of it. So this is red tape in its bad way. Now, people talk about cutting red tape, and I often wonder whether they actually do this.
Sorry, before we move on, mate, just a question. Do you think your experience and Hilda's experience in getting the card was deliberate? Because if you put enough...
I believe so.
And hurdles and everything, people may give up and decide not to.
Yeah, no, I believe that was what it was there for.
Yeah.
And I believe that they're given that direction from their government masters. They don't want to spend the money.
Yeah.
So
insurances do that. They make, when you put a claim, they make life difficult and hope that you give up and don't pursue them.
I've heard that too. It's not true of all of them. I've had very good experience with Allianz, who gave me money that I wasn't even entitled to after the bushfire.
Oh, that's lovely.
No, it was outrageously beautiful. It really was. And my last claim, when we had the burglary, I didn't actually have to provide total proof, though I could give them serial numbers of some things. I could show them the instruction sheets from the equipment and stuff like that. And they were quite reasonable in dealing with me. They didn't cut it back 1 cent, and they paid promptly. And I was, and I know other people have different experience, but that's worked well for me. They, of course, put up my policy again, but there we go. I figure that's the penalty for actually claiming. You pay more.
That's cool.
Okay. Meanwhile, back at cutting red tape, it sounds like a good thing. Okay.
Yeah.
But red tape itself actually could be a reaction to risk, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
And what you talked about, Vita, controlling the purse strings, right? Only letting out money in a stream that you can manage, and whatever else limitations that you may have. So let's look at this a little bit more.
One of my reasons for paying them all at once, you know why? It's, once again, it was waste, because I used to get hounded on the phone.
Yeah, I know, all the time.
Can you pay my invoice? And like, I used to pay them promptly on the 30-day, but these poor contractors were, you know, strapped for cash and they wanted to pay early. And I thought, you know what? I'll just pay everybody, and that way nobody's going to ring me.
Excellent. I don't think it was there for your personal convenience, Vita.
But I mean, like you, I used to also do payroll, you know, and those two jobs kept me so busy. And there was nothing worse when you're doing payroll and you're getting these damn interruptions for an invoice that, you know, and then I'd screw up payroll because I got interrupted. And I thought, oh, stuff this, I'm just going to pay everybody.
Yeah, well, there you go. Okay. Now, in real terms, there's some things you can do to cut red tape. The first one is budget for emergencies. This is to have more than sufficient resources, but not a plethora. The
like toilet paper.
Well, no, this goes back to your thoughts about having a railway station to cater for 70,000 people.
Yeah.
Now, should you do it for the maximum? Should you do it for the minimum? Or should you do it for something that is reasonable, right? Without going the whole hog and having to accommodate 70,000 people, which would be impossible on a platform waiting for a train.
Well, the ideal would be that you build a platform big enough to make sure that there's flow. So, you know, the number of people getting onto a train, it can be easily backfilled by the next lot of people waiting for the next train. So once again, you try to reduce the delay. It's not just a single point in time, as you say, let's build a platform to carry 70,000 people. Maybe we need to have a platform that carries 1,000, but you know, the trains come through and you have flow. That's exactly
the whole point. You need to think about budgeting for the high thing, but cutting it back to what could be considered reasonable. Now,
just a question on that, Peter. I mean, it's been a while since I managed a complex budget, probably when I was managing computer services for BHP's exploration. So that was pretty complex budget. But I can remember having to just basically bulk out the budget. You know, I didn't have a line item that said contingency emergencies is 10%. No, I couldn't have that. So I used to ask for a lot more than I thought that I would need.
And you and everyone else, Colin,
I'd be able to, you know, to have that.
Yeah, but
have you ever seen? My question is: have you ever really seen a budget with other than contingency in a project? I've never seen someone have a line item emergency.
Yeah, but again, if you start to think about it, if you didn't ask for enough, then you got to go back to the well so many times.
Yeah.
And people don't like you chucking your bucket down the well more than a few times.
That's right.
So the whole point is you need to think about it in terms of your budget. Is there enough there to do the job? And what level of contingency should you put in that? They're the kind of things that I'm asking people to think about here. Now, the other side of it is a government department has expenses, right? It's as simple as that. And they use the money in the budget to pay the expenses. Now, that flow never works quite the way that it should. So you end up having to, and we've had this at BHP IT when I was there. We were dealing with some government department and their budget's done every year, and you can only get the money out of their budget that they've allocated for that year. Yeah. So you can put in invoices and it's not till they get their next allocation do you actually get paid again. And it's that kind of stupidity in thinking. And that's the way they've always done it. That's the traditional way of doing it. And it's crazy. It absolutely is.
Yep.
Okay. The next one. Here's one that will really amuse those of you who work for a government department. Empower employees. Oh, God, we'd never let them do anything themselves. That we would, and we'd never allow them a level of discretion. Surely these people are adults and they must have everything checked by at least 5 other people before we can approve anything. Well, what a lot of absolute hogwash. I mean, if you employed the wrong bloody people, get rid of them and get some people that can actually use their brain. And they're setting limits.
Actually, Peter, probably the best example of that is the use of per diem instead of having to charge every single expense on a trip.
Well, and again, Colin, that's a reasonable thing to do, but that's an averaging technique.
Yeah.
And sometimes you win and sometimes you lose with that stuff. And again, is that the best way? I don't know. Okay, I'm not going to
well, that's
say I can think of reasons when you do it and reasons when you wouldn't.
Yeah, but Peter, it's one of these things where you actually absorb some of the risk, because what you're doing there with the per diem is you're basically fixing the cost of something so that the person who actually ends up paying for it eventually has some level of surety, because, you know, flights get cancelled, they may need a rebook, there could be a whole bunch of expenses. For all good and valid reasons, and the recipient doesn't want to be exposed to it. Same as building a house. You know, you never enter into a T&M contract with a builder because you'll be taken to the absolute cleaners. You know, it's a fixed price up front, and there's some strict criteria. I mean, that's why it's become this way.
Yeah, and again, all good reasons that you come up with, but the whole thing is with people. You need to set some limits. And not only that, these limits need to be about how much they actually achieve. And the achievement has got to go back to the objectives. If the objective is that you will see 20 clients a week, well, you can soon tell when you only did 10 or only 5. But was the 10 and 5 reasonable, or should you start to actually think, well, we need to actually look at limits and see whether they're realistic or they're not realistic. But limits you really should have. And it's like when you've got a coding project, you project managers, and you say, how many lines of code should the average person do in a day? And are they achieving that? So these are the sort of things that you need to have, but you need to have some flexibility in terms of how you do it. It doesn't and shouldn't be tied to the actual limit and say that's it. If you don't do that, you're fired. Or was there a reason why we couldn't achieve what it is, and how can we improve that? That's a far better way of going. And here's
unless you're trying to arrange a constructive dismissal.
Yeah, indeed. And believe me, that is an absolute thing that people do. Now, training. If you don't know, I'm actually quite big on training. And the thing is that you put people in jobs that they're absolutely not capable of doing, and you don't give them any training, and you wonder why they can't do it. Well, what a big surprise. But if you prescript everything, then you might as well employ AI or a robot. It would work better for you. So lots of things you can do by getting your people capable of doing a job, giving them limits about what their performance is, allow them to use a little bit of discretion rather than say, well, you tell people no, and that's our objective. As long as you get 50 no's a day, you've done very well. Well, it's hardly a way to run a business, and it's hardly a way to run a government service. Okay, enough on that. Here's a favourite person of mine. Does anyone know Dr. Barnes Wallace?
The bouncing bomb.
That's the boy, and not only that, the Wellington bomber.
Yes.
Were two of his inventions. And this comes out of the movie The Dam Busters. He was trying to sell an innovative idea of the bouncing bomb to a public servants, and he said to them, everything he's using had to be invented, because the bloke said, this is an outrageous idea. We want to put money into proven techniques and proven weapons.
Yes.
And he goes, but any new thing had to be invented.
Yeah.
And the problem is that almost everywhere there's an unnatural opposition among people to anything they have not thought of themselves. And this selling of ideas in people's heads, unless you sell it up front and keep selling it till the idea forms in their head, then you've got little chance of them accepting it. And this is the problem of trying to get people to think out of the square. It isn't easy.
Peter, what you're talking about there is buy-in. I mean, I've got a customer who I'm working with, and if she doesn't come up with an idea, there's no way in hell it will actually happen. So a lot of the ideas get planted and, sort of pushed that way until it becomes her idea. And guess what? It happens, and she loves taking the credit. You know what? Good luck to her.
Yeah, exactly.
We get the outcome we want.
I've done it myself. I don't know. Michael Rabinoff's joined us. I know Mike Rabinoff and I did a project called RAF Ace.
Yes.
What a great name that was. And RAF Ace was putting infrastructure on RAF bases around Australia. And we had a guy who was a pilot officer as our project representative from the RAF. And you know what he wanted out of the project, people?
What's that?
A promotion.
A promotion. And when we were the way for him to get the promotion, I used to tell him things, and then I'd go to a meeting with his superior, and I'd sit there and he'd tell it as if it was his idea. And his superior clapped him on the back and said, "That's wonderful." And I didn't say a word.
No.
Yeah, it just meant, Peter, that he kept you around a little bit longer because he saw value in the relationship.
And he got his promotion.
He got his promotion.
And believe it or don't, BHPIT got a citation.
Well, there you go.
Actually, I think, Peter, one of my early lessons in the consulting business, and I don't know whether it was you or someone else that said it to me, but I do remember, how that old adage of, a consultant says, give me a watch and I'll tell you the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that comes from a good consultant actually knows how to run a process such that the recommendations end up being the customer's idea rather than the consultant's idea.
And
the recommendations
right, Colin. That was taught to me by a senior consultant at Coopers and Lybrand. I was asked to come up with an estimating system for a company called Yazaki Australia down in Seaford that made wire harnesses, and they had problems estimating because they had 3 or 4 different ways of lashing up wires to make a wire harness. And I came up with this degree of difficulty idea, and I I stood up in front of the client, about 5 of them, and they said, "Oh, it's all too hard." And I walked out of that meeting feeling shattered because I thought it was a brilliant idea. And my colleague said to me, the senior consultant, he said, "Have you learnt your lesson?" And I went, "What bloody lesson?" He said, "Always sell the ideas one at a time before you present it to them. And they all have heard it before, and they nod and they know it, and they go into bat for it." And from that day on, I started to think, well, that's the way you absolutely do it. And it does work.
No, I'm saying something different than trickle feeding. It's it's a skill to get the client thinking that the idea is actually there.
Oh, you bet.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You
It's
bet.
a skill. It's a difficult skill, but it's the way to get a recommendation accepted. And it's back to buy-in, I think, that is it Michael or Ian was saying, it's all about buy-in.
Yep. No, all of what you're saying is true. Moving on, people.
And how did I go about it at Whyalla, Peter?
The
dead opposite.
You got me to do the cost benefit analysis that you took credit for.
Yeah. There were a few other things too. I think I broke every rule that you just said.
Well, no, yes, you did, and it was me that was left to clean up the mess, if I remember rightly.
That is dead right. Absolutely.
Yes.
I went and stood on every landmine that there was planted.
The unfortunate thing was that you were absolutely right in what you were saying.
Oh yeah.
The trouble was they didn't know you were right.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
I
had a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, and a successful project absolutely was.
Yeah.
I mean,
that wasn't my fault.
It was no. In the end, you delivered. It was one of those projects that we saw from absolute start to absolute end. And that can be quite satisfying. Consultants' lives are often knee jerks. Yes. You do this bit and you never know how it worked.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So always a problem. Okay, people, I'm here to tell you today there is good and bad red tape. Okay. Bad red tape is when there's too much bureaucratic process that bogs things down. But good red tape offers checks and balances as well as surveillance to make sure everything has been done properly. Yeah. Now, this is a balance that you actually have to work hard to achieve. How much is enough? And I don't know that there's an easy answer to that, but how much is enough? If you don't do enough, you blow money. If you do too much, you blow money. So there's got to be a way of absolutely putting a stake in the ground and saying, let's try and do it to this and see if that works. And if it doesn't work, then we make an adjustment to it. I think that's the way to do it. And this is how you achieve productivity. You absolutely can't expect to go from nothing to something immediately. It's an unreasonable expectation in many cases. And I've seen this done, and I've learnt over the years when I've done IT strategies is that I can see there are good ideas that they could do, but they've got no chance of being able to do it in 5 years. So you've got to lead them down a path that may lead them there rather than point out this is the goal and this is where you should be. If you think that they can achieve it either from spending money or from working hard, you've got to think about what resources they actually have and what abilities they have to be able to achieve it. And the same thing here in terms of thinking about red tape. How much can they achieve and how much can you get them to improve over time to get them to the objective that you actually have? Okay, yeah, well, that's fine. I'll move on. Okay. Now, I've made out tonight that the government departments are the gold standard in wasteful practices. It's not true. They're very good at it. And I reckon they get in my top 10 very easily. The commercial businesses are no better. And indeed, individuals are just as guilty. And because we all like talking BHP here, because so many of us had some things to do it, let's have a look at some of these things. Hot briquetted iron. What a wonderful thought process this was. It had no chance of success. It was just too bloody costly, but they spent millions trying to do it. And I don't know, is it still work, Col, or is it gone?
Well, no, it's coming back in big time, right? Because it's our pathway to green steel. Basically, is to come up with green iron first, and then use electric arc furnaces to have green steel. But so I think it's coming back. But I think you're probably right that it was never going to work economically. But they did have a project. People were doing these things already, but BHP Iron Ore did such a bad job. I reckon if they had have got the BHP Steel people to do that project, you know, the people that knew how to build a big complex machine, you know, to convert, in effect, iron ore to metal, in effect, is what it was. They should have got BHP Steel to run that project, and I reckon, it would have, at the very least, BHP Steel would have said, well, this is not economic, because they would have properly costed it. But the iron ore people are just, it was really just, I don't know, primary school kids doing a university project.
I'm afraid so. And Magna Copper, what a clever thing to do. You buy a company at the top price, and then the price falls to hell, and it's not even economic.
Yeah.
And Kobe Adams did really well out of that.
Did he? I'm very pleased for him. And the old BHP IT SAP disasters. Did you know, people, I went to our management and told them, listen, stupid, if we've got a fixed price contract giving Price Waterhouse a time and materials project, they'll just bleed you dry.
Yeah.
And they went, you don't know, Peter, they'll be good, they'll toe the line, they'll do the right thing. And then we lost our shirt.
Did you hear about Price Waterhouse with government projects? And they're having a Royal Commission at the moment where they're bleeding government for hundreds of millions and hundreds of millions.
Yes, they're good at that.
Yeah, so is BHP, Queensland Health.
Yes, well, we're not on our own for having these type of things. But the issue comes down to if the things are thought through properly, if the objective is understood, if we have measurable outcomes and we hold people to what the measurable outcome should be, then clearly we can do much better than we've done before. I mean, I'm bemused. In Victoria, we have these wonderful infrastructure projects. Now, they are terrific, people. I mean, we've needed these things for years. The only problem is we don't like paying for them because they always run over budget and cost billions more and deliver late. So there's something wrong with the review of the project when it goes up that says that this isn't properly costed, and it's either not properly resourced, or you can't do it in the time frame that you actually think you can,
or you haven't actually scoped it properly. That seems to be most of the problem.
It's certainly part of it.
There's also an underlying problem in that there's no consequence. Who cares if you submit something that says 5 billion and it turns out to be 10 billion. I mean, you look at the Mikey system, how much, I think that cost more than $1 billion, and there's talk about getting rid of it. No one was held to account.
Yeah, and this is quite common in big companies. It's quite common in government. It's the answer is it's about, did we get the bang for the buck? Did you know? And I think it's Shell, if I remember rightly, said that the payback on any project had to be 12 months. And if it didn't pay back within that time frame, then you were fired.
Yeah, except that most big infrastructure projects, they're very hard to make a cost benefit analysis and work.
I know.
And you it's very hard to scope them right in the first place.
Well, again, if you can't scope the whole thing, then at least scope
So
part
of it. Yeah. But you see, often they come up and they say it's going to cost X. Well, that's for this little bit of the project. And then when they approve it and get going, then they do what they actually need to do.
Yep.
And then everybody says, oh, it's over budget. Well, actually not for the scope.
Yes, well, that's, I guess, the thing that people don't understand particularly well, or it's not sold properly, or people's expectations are oversold to start with.
Yep, that's right.
Yep. All right.
Actually, just a point on the SAP projects. My view as to why they have been such successful money spinners for the likes of Accenture and others, and SAP themselves, is I think that they worked out the magic set of stakeholders that if you get these two groups on your side, you can't lose. And
yeah, no, you're really right, Colin.
It's the finance people and the HR people.
Yeah,
right?
no, you're right.
It's
you're
all about enterprise
right.
resource management, right? It's money and people. If you get the senior HR person and the senior and the CFO wedded to your project, then of course you've got the person that controls the money and has influence with the CEO and the exco on any money matters. And then you've got the HR people who have influence on any people matters. And so I think that was the clue. You get those two stakeholders stitched up, and you got the company stitched up, and they've been milking those projects for money. And take Accenture, despite them probably, causing Mary's Cloppers to be sacked. Nevertheless, when BHP went to bid for, who's going to be on their panel for IT projects, Accenture gets on the panel. I mean, after having milked them blind, they still come back. I mean, that's just impressive, really, to me.
I have short memories.
I wonder.
That's right.
I wonder if there was any kickback from the panel that appointed Accenture too.
I think Mike had it right. It's the churn of stakeholders, the people that make the new decision. We'll hire Accenture, had nothing to do with the original decisions of getting Accenture for SAP. They never wore it. All those people got left or had been sacked, including right up to Mary's Cloppers. I had it at the BHP mid-year, the annual, the dinner that Rick Lamb organises. We got in discussing that, and I can't remember others. I was making that point, and someone said, "Oh yeah, absolutely, Mary's got sacked because of OneSAP," and yet Accenture sails through. They're just very good at it.
All right, people, we've got to move on. Okay. Did you know Australians are the second highest producers of waste per person in the world?
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
Yes, I knew.
We are shockers.
And we are not just wasters. We are one of the few nations in the world that soak up something like 80 cents in a dollar just in admin, like waste, in other words. Whereas other countries like the US and Canada do it like for 20 cents in the dollar.
Yep. And this is the whole point of what I'm trying to say tonight. The issue comes down to, now you've got to have a level of administration.
Yes.
It's just nuts to think you get away without it. But the point is, administration should be a help, not a hindrance.
Yeah, agreed.
And the bureaucracy that you have, the checks and balances and all the other good things that you have are important things to have to stop yourself burning your hand when you put it in the fire. But the whole point of it is too, if you don't have checks and balances, if you don't have proper processes, then your chances of actually achieving the result are somewhat limited. So the whole thing about it is thinking about innovative ways that we can do things better. Okay. And there's a number of sectors that are terribly wasteful. Construction. Guys, we're having a house built. It's not uncommon in our street. See, people seem to want to build houses all the time in our street. I don't know why. But we got a new
interest rates are clearly aren't high enough.
Well, no, that they paid $2.5 million for the block. No house on it. No, nothing.
Yeah.
And you say to yourself, well, shit, you better make some money on the houses you build or you've blown your dough.
Well, remember, just to stimulate the building industry after COVID was giving what 100,000 for new builds and 20,000 for renovation.
And a reasonable thing to do to keep the economy running. But you think about it. Construction is a terrible wasteful industry.
Oh yeah,
The amount of waste that occurs on a building site.
Oh yeah.
They overorder.
No, they have to.
I know.
10% of the material you'll get is waste.
It's better to have and not use rather than not have and need and have to wait for it to be supplied. It costs too much money.
And here's the whole estimating dilemma again.
Wait, right? Peter, when my dad was building our first house, right, my mum did all the calculation for the bricks, and she counted all the half bricks and he had to reuse them. And my dad, I remember I was only 10. I remember my mum and dad having this stand-up arguments. And my dad was saying, you know, when the bricklayers are up on the scaffold, they're not going to come down and collect those half bricks to use them on corners and whatever. And when they're thrown down, they're not going to place them gently. They'll get smashed and everything, and you can't reuse them. So my mum had this difficulty of reusing, and my dad not wanting to reuse half bricks and 3/4 bricks. And my mum was saying, well, we don't have the money to build the house then if you're not going to reuse this material, etc. And I had that problem recently where I had to renovate a bathroom, and the tiler goes, oh, I count 10% is waste. I said, what for? He goes, well, I can't reuse if I've used the edge on the tile, I can't reuse it if it's not the right edge, finish edge, and this, that, and the other. I thought, what a bloody wasteful practice they've got.
And people, this is so common in the industry. It absolutely is. And what I've been watching on this site is they've got a wonderful bag, and they won't let me in on the site anymore. And they've got all these blocks of wood that I could take up to the fire and burn. No, you're not allowed on the site anymore.
Good firewood.
Yeah, I like that anymore.
And I was reusing. I mean, recycling and no, you're not allowed to. Such is life.
You know why? Because if you trip and fall or end up with a nail stuck in the bottom of your foot, you're going to see the ass off them.
I know, and it's just how things are. Okay.
It's a shame.
They could put that material out on a nature strip and you could collect it.
And then somebody might get a nail in their hand.
Yeah, all of that, and then just not allowed to anymore.
Councils don't let them put it out on the nature strip or use the domestic garbage supply to throw things away. Apparently, when the truck comes and it lifts your bin up, it takes a couple of photos to see what's coming through, and if it's contaminated, i.e., building materials, the driver puts it down, and you get a fine or something. So it's bureaucracy at its best.
Yep. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about Telstra now. I have had a fault with the phone up at the farm, the landline, because we don't get mobile service very well, if at all. And it's been going on now for 2 years. And I love ringing Telstra. It really is the most annoying thing where I sit on the phone for 3 and 4 hours waiting for the bastards. And then I'm asked 50 bloody stupid questions, most of which are redundant because they know the answers. And the fool said to me, "What's your postcode?" I said, "What, are you going to post a technician to me?" I said, "We don't have a post box. We don't have a postcode because we're on a dirt road."
Yeah.
And the whole thing is, all they're doing is wasting my time asking me this stupid stuff. Would you believe it, people? I rang again this week that the service is crap again. And I got this nice young lady. She said, "Oh, yes, I can see you've had problems before." Didn't ask me any of the stupid questions, got straight to organising a time for them to come. And they've kept me informed with it. Something's happened at Telstra. It absolutely has. I don't know how long before they fall back in the hole, but I'm so grateful that they walked out of it and they've changed their processes. They've started to think about customer service and they're starting
I've got an alternative theory.
to deliver.
No, alternative theory, Peter. You caught the Vita who was paying every invoice. You caught the Vita early on in her career who hasn't yet been trained on how to drag out things for the customer.
Actually, I have to say something about Telstra.
That's not true. They've got a new CEO and I even got a check from them.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
I was actually going to suggest the theory that they've lost so many customers that they've actually now got they're at the right capacity to service the ones that have actually stayed with them.
And if you don't think I gave them, when they asked me to fill in one of their surveys, the greatest payout, on several items they got 0 out of 10. And I wrote down why. And maybe they're starting to think that actually wasting people's time is only wasting their own time. I mean, the fault won't go away.
Yeah.
No, it won't.
And the thing is,
but here's the thing, guys. I recently cracked the shits over the gas prices and electricity prices. So I've spent a couple of weekends trying to understand how the whole thing works, and it's just bullshit on bullshit on bullshit, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
But anyway, I've actually found one that's a lot cheaper, and I've actually signed up with them and going with them. Gas for about 2.4 cents per megajoule or whatever the case may be. Much better than the 4 cents that my current provider. By the way, it still comes through multinet anyway. So I'm waiting for the current provider I have to ring me up and say, "Oh, please stay with us and do this." And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to keep them on hold for 30 minutes.
I have to say I had an experience with Telstra and NBN that my NBN stopped working. I rang them up and we worked through the problem. And he said, "Yeah, it's actually a physical problem. I'll put a call through to NBN." The guy turned up next day and fixed it.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
but you're in suburbia, it's different.
Oh, yes, I know that. Yeah, I know. If you're in the country, forget it.
Yeah, where Peter is and where I am, they forget about us. They know we can't go to another carrier because there is no other carrier here or another provider. They're not interested because they haven't got the volume, and we are just it's Telstra or nobody or the highway.
Oh yes,
but hang on, guys. Guys, did you hear Ian's story? He rang Telstra. They got somebody to come out the next day. I mean, isn't that amazing? Doesn't matter even if you live next door to the Telstra place.
Yeah, well, it's actually NBN that turned up the next day.
Oh, well, they're the ones that own all that stuff now.
All that wire, yeah. But I was amazed. I have to say, I was impressed.
Yeah. Well, the absolute fallout of it is They've now decided that they don't need one person to fix my problem up the farm. They've got two, and they're coming out on Monday.
Oh, wow.
Because the fault's so bad. I think I'm nearly the only person left on the line, and the line's 5 kilometres from one end of the road to the other.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
geez.
probably too far. Yeah.
Anyway,
I guess, Peter, we've got our topic for next.
yeah, what? Let's kick Telstra. Yes,
Yeah.
no. Okay, moving on, people. The thing about too many processes are that they're redundant. And I'll give you an example. This was before Mr. Searle did a job at Smith and Nephew. I did a job for them, helping them find a new computer system. And I interviewed God knows how many people, I can't even remember. I go around and talk to everyone. And I'm sitting down with this young lady, and she's telling me about her job, because I'm asking her all the questions. And I thought, gee, that sounds like the same job that another girl did that I spoke to 3 days ago. And I looked at it, and it was exactly the same job. They were both doing the same job with the same input and producing the same output with the same data.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I went to the deputy managing director, who was the guy I was working for, and I said, do you know you got this problem? And he went, oh my God, they didn't even know. And I thought, this is how it really does come. People actually are living in it for so long, they don't recognize you've got a problem.
Yeah.
And this is the whole problem. Unless you are prepared to look at it and actually say, is this reasonable? Are we doing this properly? Are we using the right technology? Are we doing it in the best possible way, and only handling stuff once instead of handling it multiple times? Yeah, I remember that, and I can't remember whether this was the first IT adage I ever learnt, was you always use data, you capture data once at its source,
yeah,
you use it many times. You don't recapture it and recapture it.
Yeah.
And that's never left my head. And I've always been mindful of that when I've done this kind of work. Anyway, and my friend Henry Ford, who made some automobiles once upon a time, if you always do what you've always done, then you'll always get what you always got.
Yes.
Yep. And he said it true. And this was in different words, but the same words Yo Lam O told me, the father of computers in Australia, about us inventing things. He said, I invented nothing new. I simply assembled the discoveries of other men behind whom were centuries of work. Progress happens when all these factors come together. And this is true, people. If you can see that you can use something that you've seen somewhere else and put it in place and it will work better, then it's worth considering. And that's what I've done in my consulting work almost all my life. I go, they use that in this industry, and I think if you do this, it will work for you too. And that's all you need to do. But unless you've seen it, if you're sitting in the mess, you're not seeing outside the square. So the whole thing is bringing in people outside, or even sending some of your people outside to see what goes on, often delivers great results, especially in reducing the amount of time it takes to do things.
As long as you listen to them when they come back.
Yeah, well, that's half the problem, Ian. It's been half the thing. I've had difficulty trying to sell people for years. Okay. The whole point is that this person says eliminating redundancies will result in a sleek and smooth organisation that is efficient at whatever it does. Well, what a lot of crap.
Yeah.
Firstly, getting them to eliminate them, to and I can't remember, was it Yes Prime Minister or Yes Minister, one of them, and the young public servant comes up to the head and says, can I throw away these documents? And he said, yes, but make 5 copies first.
Yeah.
So these are the problems that you actually have to overcome. And yeah, there are ways of doing it. Process mapping, business reengineering, eliminating dual processes, getting rid of paper and not copy. The best thing that ever happened to accounts payable was actually taking a picture of an invoice and sticking it in the system and using that and getting rid of the paper. Best thing that ever happened. Okay. Now, here's a few things where you will see these kind of things. Parallel record keeping. 2 people keeping 2 sources of the truth.
Yeah.
How dumb is that? Why aren't we sharing? You've been looking at the debate on medical records at the moment. Oh, honestly.
What a joke.
And I had this discussion with my GP this week when I saw him to renew my scripts. And I said, why do we create all this paper? I said, I go to the chemist shop and they produce 4 ton of paper from this one script.
Yeah.
I mean, if I couldn't do better with my eyes shut, I would want to know why. And this keeping physical paper is dumb, especially when you can keep digital. Retaining manual processes alongside a company that I worked with over in South Australia. Oh, I've forgotten who it was. Might have been it was Britex Rainsford. Anyone know Britex?
No, yeah, I've heard of
it. Makes seat belts and lights for cars and shit.
Yeah, that's right.
Anyway, they found out I had a degree in robotics. And they said, Peter, come and have a look at our robot installation. And they had 2 injection molding machines side by side and a robot in between. And the robot was unloading the stuff and I watched the process. And the other molding machine wasn't going at all. And I said, why don't you have both working? And they said, oh, no, we never do it that way. And I said, well, what do you think the robot's saving? It's only saving 1 man. And they went, oh. And then here he comes. You had to see it to believe it. Here he comes with his wheelbarrow and he's walking down the aisle towards us and he picks up the box that the robot has just loaded. He puts it on his wheelbarrow and walks off down the factory. And I went, oh my God, you think this is automation, do you?
So they chucked you out of the factory at that stage, did they, Peter?
I was a little more respectful than that.
Oh, right, okay, fine.
But I had to run outside
and have a laugh
my head off and then come back. How do you like our robot installation?
He's less respectful in his old age, so the building site just bans him from
the
site.
Yeah, right, yeah. It's you remember the John Cleese skit about the machine that goes bing?
No.
Oh, it's a classic about the Minister for Health showing people through the hospital. And here's the machine that goes bing.
Excellent.
It just goes bing.
That's right.
Okay. Well, there's a list of things you can read them. I won't go through them all, but there are so many ways that you can just look at a process and say, this will eliminate 5 steps. This will only, you'll only handle this document once and do all. I mean, documents going backwards and forwards from one department to another is a nut house.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
an absolute nut house. Anyway.
I have a little story about health, Peter. My wife has been in and out of Mulgrave Private Hospital.
I believe she gets frequent flyer points.
Yeah, something like that. And I've been in and out of Alfred. Now the private hospital has these machines to push the beds around, but all the medical record keeping is on paper.
Of course.
With folders. At the Alfred, we have people to push the beds around, but all the records are on computer. So when they're giving you a medication, they wheel in this computer with a bloody big screen, and they record it all on the computer.
And surely that's the right thing to do.
Absolutely.
And sharing that record with your GP.
Absolutely, yes.
And anyone else that needs to know whether you've got allergies or that whether you've had certain things. I got my 5th COVID injection today. Wasn't that?
I did. I had it the other day. Yeah.
There you go.
Now,
okay.
Just another little bit. When you get a discharge report when you leave the hospital.
Yep, that's right.
In the Alfred, it showed every test, even if it was hold your hand up here or, do you feel tingling there? And that was all shared with the doctor. Big sheet of paper with all this stuff that they'd recorded. Now, the discharge certificates from Mulgrave are like half a page of sort of indescribable writing.
Yep.
So, I know which I'd rather have.
Indeed. And this is the sort of thing that you need to think about when you're looking at an organisation and how it's working. Could they do it better? And this brings me on nicely to efficiency and effectiveness. Now, one needs to understand the definition of these things. So I'll read these. Efficiency can be defined as the ability to achieve an end goal with little or no waste, effort, or energy.
Yeah.
So it's being
very
efficient.
Good. Yeah.
Effective is the degree to which something is successful in producing a desired result with the least amount of waste.
Yeah.
So they co-live, but they are quite different things. And Peter Drucker, who used to be my favourite, absolutely favourite person in Management 101. I love reading Peter Drucker. Efficiency is doing things right. Effectiveness is doing the right things.
Yes. And they're not the same, are they?
And productive teams do harness both.
Yes.
But they need to keep both in mind. And this is true of project management as well. So getting your people to do things efficiently to achieve the result within the time frame or better than the time frame that you've set is terrific. But delivering the goods that you were supposed to deliver, the objective of the project, and also keeping down the waste and therefore the cost to the customer is just as important.
Yep.
Okay. Now, what you can do, and this, you project managers, most of you, and I know this for a fact, are good at this. Build an effective team. If you haven't got a team, you've got a rabble. I've believed in team all my life, and I've done a lot of work in motivational theory and motivating your team to do what you want, when you want, and how you want is a bloody good trick if you can do it. Streamline your work processes. Don't build the redundancy into your project. Have your checks and balances. Absolutely, you must have your checks and balances. We talked about that earlier. But the issue about it is make sure that you don't go too far before you've, when we built our house here in Hampton, Hilda and I arrived on one night, and they'd started laying bricks, wrong bricks.
Oh, no.
There was this dark, awful chocolate brick, and we did not order chocolate bricks. So they went, oh goodness, and bashed down. They only did a small amount, bashed down a few bits, but some of the foundation that's in the dirt you won't see.
Yeah,
they left the brown bricks.
That's a nice little job for the archaeologists.
Possibly.
Yeah, to explain it.
Why is there strange bricks on this house?
That's right.
Yes.
It must be a ritual.
Yeah.
There's something darkly religious about it.
Dark satanic stuff, you think?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, okay. Automate your admin tasks. And it doesn't matter whether it's accounts payable, accounts receivable. It doesn't matter whether it's order entry. It doesn't matter what it is. Inventory management. All this stuff, the more you can automate, the best it is. I mean, you won't believe this, people. Do any of you remember brushes?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I bought my first video camera, VHS video camera from those guys.
Well, I did some consulting for Jeff Brash, and I've forgotten, it's George Allen, because it was Allen and Brash's, and I met both of them. They said to me that they needed, that their computer supplier was going out of business or was no longer going to support them or something, and I had to find them a new way of doing it. And what all I had to do for the task was actually get a new supplier, and I managed to do that for them. But they did ask me, what could they do better? And I said to them, well, barcoding your product would be a very good idea. And they said, oh, no, we couldn't do that. A sheet of music's too cheap to stick a barcode on. And I thought to myself, how much time and effort, instead of scanning it at the checkout and getting the people out the door and the next person into the cash register, how much better is that? But I could not make them see that automation actually saved them money. Blew me away. Okay.
Well, Peter, it goes back to your point about, redundancy. If every time you need to look up an item, you need to type in sheet music, A4 size, that costs money. It takes time every single time.
Well, no, it was worse than that. They used a thing called the retail method. Now, I'm going to struggle to tell you what this is, but largely items get grouped together. Sheet music is sheet music. It doesn't matter what's on it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Now, this is brilliant because, well, you only need one item and it's sheet music. But the problem is you don't know how many sheets of Bing Crosby's White Christmas you actually have in each store.
Yeah, and
you absolutely have no idea what stock you have. You have no idea how to reorder it unless somebody goes around and says, shit, we're out of White Christmas.
Exactly.
And you go, gee, and they were not managing their inventory at all. And I'm going, there's something wrong with these people. There really is.
Is that why Allen's in Burke Street always has a closing down sale every 18 months or something? Everything must
probably,
go.
Mate. Probably.
That's how they fix their stock control problem. They just get rid of everything.
Yeah, no. It's a common thing to. Well, when we made the wrong size bras at Hickory Fashions, we ended up having to sell them to Dimmies and Forges.
Yeah.
And we sold them for below cost. because we couldn't clear the shelves. So they bought them at 30% or something. And I wondered whether they cleared them any quicker. But it's how you do it. You have to think of all those things in terms of retail. There's a lot to it. There really is. Okay.
Actually, Peter, just the barcode one, just to give you an example. The only example I saw, the first example I saw of a mining company actually barcoding the end product was during the Western Mining acquisition by BHP, and Western Mining were barcoding their copper cathodes. So in a copper operation, that they go through this long mineral processing process that ends up with these sheets of copper from the tank house, and they'd get bundled up and then sold as a bundle to the customer, and they were barcoding those bundles, and I assume they're also barcoding their barrels of uranium oxide. So they were actually tracking, right down to the individual group, the items. And of course, when they got bought by BHP, they decided, well, OneSap couldn't handle barcodes, so the whole thing.
Oh God!
Oh no!
Yeah, that'd be right.
Yeah.
Well, here's the one that you've never seen. In my time in Whyalla at the steelworks, have you ever seen a slab come out of
Yes.
And they have a little shed in the middle of the yard, and this red hot, huge bar the size of a lamppost comes up to this little thing. An arm comes out, and a ramset gun fires a nail through a barcode and hammers it onto the end of the huge lump of hot steel. That was the most fantastic bar. I've still got one somewhere. That is the most fantastic barcode I've ever seen in my life. And I mean, there's plenty of other examples of how, I mean, did you ever think that you would see a single washer at Bunnings with a barcode?
Oh yes, I have seen it.
It's true.
I never thought it would happen.
No, nor did I.
Not given that you could once upon a time get 10 of them for like a cent.
Yep. So
what used to happen is that if you turned up with one thing, it was about 10 minutes while they found out what you were buying.
Yes.
That was the old days.
No, they used to have a book, and they used to put the washer on the picture in the book.
Yes, they did.
Tell you the size.
They did indeed. Yes.
Actually, one of my pet peeves was how they barcode fruit in supermarkets, until I realised, oh, hang on, instead of bloody looking up what bloody fruit I'm sticking on the weigher, I can actually, wave the fruit in front of the barcode reader, and it'll tell me
what it is.
Pictures or whatever.
My thought was they're going to need to develop genetically programmed things where the barcode is grown onto the fruit, but I discovered that the labels work quite well.
Well, I don't know if people have noticed in the
good job, Ian. Good job.
area of Coles, they've actually got weight scales.
No, guys, we need to move on. We're nearly at 9 o'clock.
Okay, Peter.
Okay. Talk to your resources. Tonight, I've heard you all come up with ideas. This is wonderful. This is what you should be doing, is talk to people, and you'll get these ideas.
Yes.
And even if they sound a little outlandish, if you think it through, they may work, and you maximise your people's knowledge. Okay. No, I won't read that. Lots of things there you can think about. Now, project team managers, I put some stuff in for you. And you all moan. You all do. I've heard you all do it. Oh, me project team aren't doing it. We're going over budget. Oh. Now, the whole point is, when you have estimates that have the degree of accuracy, that means if you're putting a man on the moon, he or she would land in Mars if they landed at all.
That's right.
And I've seen it all before. We're 98% complete, they told me, the project director. 98%. I'd say, oh, goody. then you'll be able to have it finished by next week. Oh no, we've got other things to do. The last 2% always takes 50% of the time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh dear. Okay. I won't go through this either. You can read them later. I'll send you a copy of the slides. I wanted to get on. Okay. The problem is that we're all lazy. We do what we think works, or has worked before. And the whole point is, will we get off our own rear end and find out whether there's actually a better way of doing things? Of course not. Why would we? And I've got some help for you people. I've sent you a list of this wonderful 50 great ideas that you can improve your own professional performance. You can read them. I'll show you a few. But you need to work out which ones will actually work for you. And I thought some of the ideas were quite good. And one of my pet hates, you all know that I've got a friend called Ralph Ortmans, and I go and work on his farm.
Yes.
And he comes and works on mine, and we yell and scream at each other, and we have, generally speaking, quite a good time of it. But Ralph's not real good at finishing. He has 20 projects on the go, and they all just require a little bit to get them finished. Well, I truly hate that, because I believe you actually finish the bloody job and then you move on to the next one. And I hate leaving, if it means that I put a coat of paint on it, if it means that I go and tidy the area up and put my tools away. All those things that are important to me, not necessarily the same for everyone else. So you need to think about what is important for you and how do you get the best bang for your buck. So here's some ideas. At the start of each day or the night before, highlight 3 or 4 most important things you have to do in the coming day. Do them first.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go, Pete.
This one's
It's on
about
the
this one's about mind maps.
Hey, Stephen,
You can read it all. I'm not going to read it
Peter,
out.
Peter, you missed. Just I can't help interrupting that point about doing the one first. The key to that diagram is which do you do second?
Right.
Right. The second one is not the urgent.
You'll see that in a minute, Colin.
Ones.
Yeah, you'll see that in a minute.
Oh, okay. Good.
Okay. And this one is having rules and goals. And you know I believe in that. But the whole thing here is SMART goals stand for they're specific, they're measurable, they're attainable, they're realistic, and they're timely. Well, bother me. Shouldn't the project be run like that? And good old Pareto analysis. What a wonderful Italian mathematician he was.
Yes.
And the whole point is you need to figure out which part of your work is going to give the best results, and you focus much energy as you can on that. Not, oh, I'll do a bit over here. A friend of mine from BHP, does anyone remember Jim Mabry?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, yeah.
The value proposition.
Very, very well. He was a wonderful guy.
He's a lovely man. But Jim has a problem in life. He's a butterfly. And he goes, oh, that's a nice flower over there. And he flaps his wings and goes, oh, look, there's another one. Oh, I'll go over there. He never gets anywhere.
He worked on my project for 2 years. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, I mean, he used to infuriate the shit out of me. He really did. And I went, no, Jim, do this. No, this is nice over here. Have a look at this. And I go, oh, my God. I thought at one point of actually bringing in a chain and a padlock and actually chaining him to the work. That was Jim. And he had a wonderful appreciation of what was nice, not a wonderful appreciation of getting something done. Oh dear. Okay. So you can read about that one. This one here, I think, is on the next slide as well. And this is about using two axes, not axes. Shouldn't that be AXIS?
Yes.
I thought so. Okay. One for importance and the other for urgency, and looking where they intersect. And I think there we go. This tells you what you need to do in each of the squares, and the things that you actually do, and the things that you should avoid and the things that you should limit. And I'm pleased to see in limit, they decide we should actually limit waste. So you've received a Word document from me tonight. You can read all 50 and you can decide whether any of them are useful to you, and whether they will help you improve the way that you do your work. But I thought it was a pretty nice publication, and I've even forgotten the guy that gave it to me, but since I've given you his document, you'll be able to read who it is.
Yeah, it's Steve Covey.
Is he any good? Okay.
Peter, I've got a very simplified version of that. I think of management as juggling balls, and while they're glass, you've got to keep them up in the air, so they're the priority tasks. The ones that are rubber can bounce around on the ground. Who cares about them? But you've got to be careful when a rubber ball turns to glass, because once it falls on the ground, it shatters into a million pieces.
That's the one. And this one here is assign a set amount of work a day to work on a task or project. The whole point of often, if you're working on a problem, and I've often had to do this, if you focus on it too long, you're becoming unproductive because you're not seeing the problem anymore.
Gets stale.
The story goes, I worked at a company called Rock Thompson Wholesale Pharmaceutical Company, and one of the things I got to know intimately was their invoicing program. And when I came back the second time, they were having trouble with it, and it was this dreadful top-down piece of code, no modular stuff in it. It was all bloody over the place. It was, I don't know, 50 pages and maybe more of absolute crap code. And the trouble was you had to get it in your head. You couldn't actually track it unless you understood how it worked, and you had to get it all in your head and work step by step through it. Anyway, I'm leaning over this bloody program that one of my guys has given me because he couldn't find the problem. And I'm leaning over it. I'm kneeling on my chair on my work desk, and I'm looking at the program, and my nose is just about touching the paper. And all of a sudden I see it. And I said, that's it. And I leant back with my arms like that. I threw them above my head. I went flying out of the chair. And the glass panel at the back of me, where the managing director was standing talking to the ledger machinist, I hit that wall with some force. And the window shook. And there was silence for 10 minutes. And he said suddenly, are you all right, Peter? And I had to come in and tell him how difficult it was to find the damn thing. And it was such a eureka a moment when I actually found it. And this is the whole thing. If you've got a problem like that, it's often good to walk away from it and let your brain go into neutral. And it's amazing when you sleep on a problem like that, how you wake up with a solution. It often is.
I had a solution to an intractable problem which came to me in the middle of a funeral.
Oh my goodness. I do hope you had a piece of paper.
Oh, I remembered it all right.
Well, that was good.
Yeah.
It
I was-
wasn't
when I-
about
when
it wasn't about saving the life of the person you were attending.
No, no, absolutely
That's
not.
not nice,
I-
Colin.
I-
That's
I-
not nice.
I won't explain what it is. It
Um,
was rather complicated and all to do with an assembly language problem.
excellent. I kept, oh, I still do. I suppose I can still find it. A pad in one of the drawers by my bed. And I used to get out in the middle of the night and turn the light on and
Yeah.
sit down and write the solution down on the piece of paper. The only problem to me was when I got up in the morning was reading what I wrote and trying to understand what the hell I was on about.
Yeah, well, there we are.
There you go.
Not the fact that you had to put up with a very angry Hilda because you kept her up half the night.
Well, yes, I would get this odd question of, what are you doing? Never mind. So all sorts of bits there, people. I just got there. So I got to the last slide and I'm sorry, it's 9:05. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm
That's all
sorry
right,
if I've wasted all your valuable time today, but I do hope I got something out of trying to improve both the effectiveness and efficiency and indeed trying to reduce waste.
Yep.
Here, end of the lesson.